welcome back. So I'm so happy to announce that we have Matt Dottie, the founder and principal consultant of XDGO. He'll be presenting People First, a human-centered innovation and transformation iteration. Without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing. And Matt, you are free to go.
Excellent. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. If anybody was, Michelle, when did I do the ABC thing? Do you
I think it was
remember?
about a year and a half ago. It might have been
Wow,
longer.
was
Yeah,
it that long ago?
I think so.
Okay. Well, all right then. That sounds awesome. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen, and we're just going to get started and I'll do like a little intro in the deck itself. So thanks for coming out. Let's see here. There we go. All right, can everybody see that?
Yep.
Yes.
Good. Okay, good. Awesome. Okay, so I have honestly about an hour and a half's worth of material that I'm going to go through that I've pared down, and I'm just going to rip through it. But please, my priority is making sure that if you have questions or anything like that, that we get to those rather than me getting through everything. So very much want to favor discussion, conversation over just making sure that I get through all of my content. I think I can make it through all of my content, but I will welcome questions, and I'll probably stop as we go through different sections. So just really quickly, I want to set the stage so that you guys kind of know where I'm coming from. I've been a lot of different places, and I've been called a whole bunch of different names professionally. And the thing, I guess, kind of my elevator pitch is that that I say to people when they ask what I do, I say that people simply prefer good experiences with product, services, and technology, and that organizations and companies that provide good experiences can save money, save time, increase revenue, and increase customer loyalty by taking more of a human-centered approach and actually providing these good experiences. And so often I'm asked, okay, so how do we actually do that? How do we create these good experiences? And really, it comes down to three words. We need to intentionally be designing experiences. So that's what we have to do. And in other words, we have to do something that I call experience design, or XD. Now, in the last decade plus, experience design in all of its manifestations has exploded. And amidst that explosion, I've noticed two really interesting phenomena. One is you have individuals, so people who come to the table doing experience design, who sometimes struggle to provide the full value for one reason or another of a human-centered approach. At the same time, you have organizations that believe in doing things with a more human-centered lens, struggle to enable and sustain what it takes to actually do really good experience design. And so that's why I created XDGO. That's my company. I'm not going to sell anything. That's just kind of who I am, my background, and what I do. And really, what I do, XDGO is just me. What I do is I help organizations, teams, and individuals get really good and strengthen their experience design capabilities through a whole bunch of different stuff. Tonight, I want to talk about what I do, three things that I do for organizations, and that's really the topic of our conversation tonight, which is three things called human-centered innovation, transformation, and iteration. And so where we'll start is this idea of human-centered innovation, or really how do we go about envisioning the experience our audiences will expect in the future. So where I like to start in talking about innovation, I like to share my quote unquote favorite definition of innovation that I found on the interwebs. I love this. It's the action or process of innovating, which is just a lovely circular definition. But really, no, my true favorite definition of innovation that I've adapted is the ability to create new and potentially valuable ideas, but it's also a process of transforming those ideas into a more viable reality. So when we think about human-centered innovation, it's really all about applying the principles and techniques of human-centered design to the innovation process. And so one of the things that I think is important to bring up at this point is, if any of you have experience with an innovation project or a new innovation initiative or anything like that and trying to influence that, there are some common pitfalls that I'm sure you are familiar with. And I want to just talk about 6 of those, and then we'll kind of get into a more real example of how human-centered innovation can address some of these. So one pitfall is, sometimes with innovation work, we fall into the trap of generating ideas without really having any mechanisms in place to do something with them. Another thing that we do sometimes, or that others do, is push for answers without really defining, okay, what problem are we trying to solve? Another one that I've encountered frequently is this notion of a really strong appetite for taking risks, but if you fail, there's a punishment lurking around the corner. Another one is expecting experiments without providing access to a well-stocked laboratory. What I mean by this is without really kind of outfitting the individuals responsible for experimenting with what they need to perform really good experiments. Another one is insisting on revolutionary breakthroughs without allocating the A team and other resources. And then finally, demanding disruptive ideas without dedicating or protecting time and people for that task. So I'm assuming that there are those on this call who have encountered one or more of these pitfalls. Is there? I'm seeing some nods. If we were live, we would do like a hand, and I would ask people to share, and but yeah. So these pitfalls really, I don't know. They kind of get at the heart of exposing some of the value that a human-centered approach and being intentional about experience design can bring to our teams and our organizations. And so I'll ask this question frequently throughout my talk, but yeah, that all sounds great, but what does that actually look like? So as I said before, I want to highlight just 3 of these, just for the sake of time, and I want to walk you through a kind of a fictional case study that is based in reality, of someone who is an executive who had been charged with innovating, and how the principles and techniques of human-centered design were applied to the innovation process. So I'd like you to meet our fictitious executive, Tamara. She is a VP that's been charged with identifying 3 to 5 strategic growth opportunities for the organization. And so she is going to begin her innovation journey. And before she gets too far, she runs into one of our pitfalls. So the situation that she's facing is there are people insisting on revolutionary breakthroughs without allocating A-team resources. Now, what I'm not going to say is that, UX and human-centered design and XD are the only solution to this pitfall, but we do have meaningful things to contribute. So what I suggest is that there are human-centered skill sets that can and should be part of these A-team resources. And when I talk about human-centered skill sets, there's really 3 things that I want to lean into. The first is the skill of design research. So this is a broad skill set that should be present in any innovation project. So design research allows you to both understand and empathize with the people that you're designing for, as well as validate your design decisions as you go. The other skill set is what I call experience strategy. This is kind of the sense making and the storytelling of a bunch of different, maybe seemingly different data points, but bringing them together in really meaningful ways. And that's a really unique skill set. And being able to take that insight and translate it into action that the organization not only should take, but that they're excited to take, is really kind of a unique skill set. And then finally, this third kind of skill set bucket I call experience modeling. This is where we have the envisioning, the designing, the prototyping of the actual experience, whether it be a product, a service, or technology. We need to have something to show the people that we're designing for, to show our stakeholders, and to make sure that what we are going to be delivering out there in the wild is what they expect and is something that we can support as a business. So now that we've met that obstacle, Tamara's gonna keep going on her innovation journey, but she runs into another pitfall. She's now in a situation where someone is pushing for answers without really defining problems worth solving. And so what I suggest here is that we engage in what I call human-centered problem definition. And what does that look like? Among other things, human-centered product definition can take three forms. One is conducting secondary research. Secondary research is looking at, okay, what is the research that we already have that has been done by other people? And then turning around and asking ourselves, what does it mean and where are the gaps? And then how can that influence our primary research? Another one is audience observation. One of my favorite quotes that I think is attributed to Steve Jobs is that, you can't ask users what they want because they don't know what they want. And I actually believe that that's true. And one of the most powerful ways to overcome that is to actually watch people trying to accomplish something in your innovation space. And you learn a lot about not just the problems, but the opportunities that might be opportunities for you and your organization to innovate. And then a third way is through audience ideation. This is where you bring in your audience, your target, either your customer or your employees, whoever it is that you're designing for. You engage in co-creation and other workshops to generate ideas that you wouldn't have otherwise. So now Tamara has these human-centered problem definition techniques under her belt, and she's going to continue on her innovation path before running into our third and final obstacle, which is this one about generating ideas and not really having any mechanisms or processes in place to do something with them. And so what I'll suggest are human-centered mechanisms. And three of those are, one is as simple as an idea backlog. If you're generating ideas, have some sort of mechanism to document, not just document what the idea or the concept is and a brief description, but use that as a mechanism to say, okay, what do our executives think? What do our customers think of this idea? What do the other stakeholders think? How much of an effort do we think this is? And then looking at all that data, it allows you to be a little bit more objective in figuring out, okay, which ones should we actually pursue? We've generated 300 ideas, but look, because of all of this information in our idea backlog, we've been able to whittle it down to 30. Another way is to do concept testing. There's a nice theme here of doing research. So you can do concept testing as soon as you have something to show your customer or the people that you're designing for. Get it in front of your audience and start getting feedback. And then finally, there's an exercise that you can do with stakeholders and others in the organization to actually workshop what relative priority do all these different ideas have? Which ones seem most feasible, viable, scalable, and desirable to the customer? So that's kind of how, in this example, Tamara handles this pitfall of generating ideas without mechanisms to do something with them. And give me just a second, I'm going to shut my office door. Hold on. I am back. All right, so that is kind of in a story or a narrative format what human-centered innovation could look like. If we were to outline human-centered innovation as kind of a high-level process, it really, at least the process that I follow, is one that I think is similar to many other design problems. So there's a discover phase, there's a frame phase. We also want to envision, or kind of figure out, like, okay, where do we want to head? And then finally figure out, okay, of these, which one should we actually pursue? And I'm not going to drain this slide, but just to give you a sense of, okay, here are steps that one can follow to discover the audience and the context, to frame the opportunity, to envision the future, and evaluate your innovations. And to the savvy observer, this is also kind of the double diamond of divergent and convergent thinking. And it's really a great mental model to apply to this idea of human-centered innovation. And I will pause there before we move on to human-centered transformation to see if there are any questions. I know I'm racing through this rather quickly, so if there's anything anybody wants to see, or if there are any questions or concerns or criticisms, I'm happy to.
Would you mind speaking just a little bit more to Double Diamond?
Yeah, absolutely. So the double diamond, I guess, way of thinking about solving problems is it represents a series of ways of thinking. So where the diamond splits, that's where you're trying to generate hypotheses and ideas. All of this is very generative work. Then when the diamond slopes down, it's about, okay, now that we have all of this. So in this case, the double diamond peaks at the end of Discover and then comes back down at the end of Frame. Discover is about learning everything we possibly can about the problem space. Then Frame is about, okay, let's get really clear about the problems and opportunities that we think we're actually facing. So it's converging. If the opening of the diamond is diverging, the closing of the diamond is converging. So it's about the way that you think about things, and so so then when you look at Envision, you're trying to generate as many ideas as possible and create as many kind of lo-fi concepts. And then when you evaluate, you're actually trying to now pare down and focus your efforts before everybody actually signs off on which 2 to 3 innovation projects we're actually going to pursue. Does that help?
It does. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. What else? You guys are now down here, so if I'm looking down here, I'm actually looking at you.
Just looking at this looks very much in line with kind of the Google Design Sprint process. So I don't want to jump ahead, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts around how this maps to that, if at all.
Yeah, no. When we get into iteration, I think you'll see some stuff there. So this is yeah. Any others before we jump into the transformation part of it?
Just want to say, it kind of reminds me of a SWOT analysis.
Yeah.
You've ever done one of those? Yeah.
I have. Yeah.
Definitely reminds me of that.
Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
Yep. My advertising background kicking in.
It's a great tool. It's a really, really, really great tool. Yeah, when you don't know where to start, SWOT's a great place to just begin.
Definitely. I apply it to my life.
I know, I do too. Those in my family and friend circle, I drive them crazy because another tool that I use is the RACI model for decision making, and it's like it applies to everything. It's like, okay, fine, who's responsible, who's accountable, who's consulted.
Yes. We love our models. Informed. Yes. I was actually just researching about the RACI model, so that's cool.
Yeah, no, I'm a huge fan. Okay, so let's talk about human-centered transformation. And I guess one thing I want to say before going forward here is, it's easy to think of these things as, oh, this is a process. First we innovate, then we transform, and then we iterate. And there's some truth to that, but what I'm not trying to suggest is that this is the process that I follow. But I will say this, I have never been a part of an innovation project that hasn't exposed some aspect of the culture or the organization that needs to change or transform. Because inevitably, when you think about a business trying to wrap its head around what are the things that we could pursue from an innovation standpoint, many of those are going to be things that we are not really ready to do, and we would need to make some changes. And so this section's about, okay, what's the kind of the process that I follow to help organizations realize more of the benefits of human-centered design across the board. And there's a process that I follow that just kind of depending on where things are, that I will lean into stronger or less, and that'll all make sense here in just a minute. So I'm a big fan of storytelling, so I'm going to frame the human-centered transformation conversation in a conversation. So if the green person here is a potential client of mine, and the blue person is me, oftentimes when I explain the idea of helping them grow and change, they're like, wow, how do you do that? My answer is, well, there's kind of 5 major stages. And so when I help organizations, I kind of try to figure out where they are and do something in all 5 of these stages. So the first stage is I call stabilize. It's for stabilizing the environment, making sure that any change that we want to make is actually going to stick. If people aren't bought in, that could be an unstable environment. Another kind of stage of work I call establish. So if there's any new kind of capability that we need to establish, let's actually start bringing that in, whether we upskill people through training or hire people or whatever, or some combination of the two. That's really established. It's also about getting smart about the processes and the kind of standard operating procedures that we want to follow to be more human-centered. The third stage I call grow, which is, okay, once we have a decent idea of where we're headed, we need to expand. We need to actually make this bigger than just a couple of people. Fourth is about being more mature. So once we've established and grown, let's start specializing. Maybe let's reassess talent. Let's make sure we have people aimed at the right stuff, and then finally optimizing. Now, at this point, okay, clients are like, okay, fine. What does that really look like? And not surprisingly, each stage of work has kind of its own playbook. So when we're talking about stabilizing, really the first objective is to, okay, where's the pain? Let's fill those immediate gaps. Let's maybe bring in some trusted third parties. In stabilize, we also want to nurture relationships, understanding and partnering with everybody who has kind of skin in the game, establishing trust, and ensuring a collaborative work model. Stabilize is also about envisioning, okay, what sort of capability do we really need in these 4 walls? So let's look at people's skills. Let's look at the current experience. Let's look at where skills need to be in the future, and then align on a shared vision. The playbook for the establish phase has 3 objectives. First is to demonstrate the value of XD, of experience design, and the human-centered mindset. And to do that, we want to be loud about our success. We want to demonstrate it. We want to teach and train the organization, both in formal and in informal ways. Also, we want to drive and shape the experience design capability, which means that we co-create and implement processes, ways of working, standard operating procedures. We want to document and track success. So what are we measuring ourselves again? What are we saying to the organization that we, as experience design folks, are going to be able to do? What needles are we going to move? And let's actually document that and track it. The playbook for growing, it really has 2 objectives. And even though there's only 2, there's a lot of work here. So first is to hire people that need to be hired. And second is to align needs with skills and aspirations. So this is about getting the right team or teams of folks into the organization and getting them aimed at the right work. The playbook for the 4th stage also has 2 objectives. One is to expand skills, which is, again, formal and informal training, individual coaching, career development, and then to expand the team. So as the team grows, or as the team matures, is there another layer of leadership needed? Is there, do we need to move from having more of a generalist presence to having more specialized and junior talent? Then finally, optimize. which the objectives here are to refine the capability, which is all about reevaluating, okay, where are we headed? Is that still where we want to head? And let's reorganize and refocus as needed. Finally, optimizing the workflow. This is less about the people and more about the process. I'm a big believer in making sure that we are not serving a process, but that the process is serving us. So that's why this finds its place here in the optimize area. So one thing that we're asked once people kind of understand the playbook is, okay, that sounds like a lot of work. How long does that take? How long, so we talk about innovating, we talk about making changes, changing ourselves as a culture and an organization to be more human-centered. How long? And so as a good consultant, the answer is obviously it depends. But really it depends on kind of where is your organization's current experience design maturity, and how much effort would be required from me to help you get to where you want to be. And so there's kind of this matrix of, you have client A that's on one end of the spectrum. Their maturity is low, and the effort needed might be really, really high. So some examples of a low maturity org is that nobody is explicitly accountable for designing experiences, or design means just make it pretty, or those core competencies that we talked about before, the research, the strategy, the design, really don't exist, or they're super anemic if they do. And then another aspect of kind of a low maturity in experience design is that design decisions are made by committee, or based solely on gut feel of or mood of how a certain executive is feeling that day. Somebody who's maybe like client B, who has a higher experience design maturity, or maybe has a lower effort needed. Higher maturity is really kind of the opposite of what I just laid out. You actually have an experienced design team in place. You have people who can do research, strategy, and design. You have kind of the fundamental processes in place, but you're looking to kind of tweak things and make things better. So obviously, people in client A's situations takes a longer time. I've had engagements range from 6 months to 2 years for those types of engagements. But with client B, I've had engagements that are like a week, or we just do a workshop, or I come in and do a training. So these are all things that really help with a client's ability to transform and become better at being intentional about designing experiences. So I'm going to stop there. That's human-centered transformation. Does anybody feel like they're drinking from the fire hose pretty hard now? Just a little? All right. So actually, any questions? Anything that I can answer? Did I run through something that tweaked you and you want to know more about it? Or did I ruffle anybody's feathers? Did I say something offensive? Anything?
So far, so good.
All right, awesome, good. Okay, so finally, human-centered iteration. This is all about making rapid progress, focused on the people who will use what you create. So first, I like to begin this with doing some myth busting. So just a couple myths. This is one that I face frequently, is that this idea of a human-centered approach takes too much time. In my experience, a human-centered approach can be flexibly adapted and applied to almost any situation, timeline, or budget. It's less of a question of if we're going to be human-centered and more of a question of, okay, how in this circumstance. And then what I found over the last 15 plus years is that a human-centered approach actually ends up saving time, because you don't have to do a bunch of rework and you can save money. Another myth that I enjoy encountering is that human-centered design or this idea of being intentional about designing experiences doesn't work with Agile. Not so. My experience is that a human-centered approach is actually the best way to do Agile, because it results, this is a soapbox moment for me, it results in minimum products that are most likely to be genuinely viable. And I have some thoughts, I have some soapboxy thoughts about viability if we have time. Anyway, so when we think about the agile mindset, one of my favorite resources for all things agile is the Agile Alliance. The little link down there. When we think about the agile mindset, it really is this idea of when we face uncertainty, we need to try something that we think might work, then get feedback, and then adjust accordingly. And I've highlighted you think might work and get feedback in blue, because this is where I think a human-centered approach can add the most value to the agile process, or more iterative test and learn methodologies. And I'll show you what I mean. So again, that all sounds good, but what does it look like? So human-centered iteration is really something that I layer on top of or interweave into what already exists as a agile or a test and learn methodology, which often and should begin with an envision phase, which is really just like it says here, a common understanding of both of everybody involved, really, both design and engineering at a minimum, having a common understanding of what it is that we're actually trying to do. So as soon as we have that, then actually during the envision phase, these are the types of techniques that can be employed by people who do experience design. And not all of them are appropriate, but these are the types of things that can be done in the envision phase. Then when engineering moves into their sprint 0, the first design sprint can include things like detailed diagrams, user flows, prototypes, audience feedback. And then that sprint feeds into the engineering sprint 1, where we can show up and do design quality assurance, get audience feedback, provide ongoing consultation as things that we designed in our sprint 1 are being developed. So then sprint 2, detailed flow diagrams, user, all these things can be done for the dev sprint 2 and all subsequent sprints. And one of the interesting things that I've seen happen time and time again is that when you stagger sprints and have them kind of feed each other, there's this really interesting influence chain that happens, where the things that we learn in design sprint 1 obviously influence engineering sprint 1, but then the things that we've learned in engineering sprint 1 actually feed up into what we do and influence what we do in our design sprint 3. And so there's this really interesting, and I hate this word, but it's the best word to use, synergy, ouch, that was painful, that happens between the engineering work and the design work. When I promised that I would share some soapbox thoughts on viability, and so I'll do that now, and that's how I'll wrap up this section here. So one of the things that pains my heart is to hear people in the design community kind of poo-poo agile and think that it's not worth all that much. I find that really the reason most often is because this concept of viability is misunderstood. So I want to spend a little bit of time here. So in my opinion, a product or a service or a technology can't really be considered minimally viable unless the people we're designing for are likely to want it and will use it, and the people that are trying to make a living, or the business from it, will actually see the results that they hope for. This results in kind of two types of viability that should be thought of when we think about MVP. So there's customer viability. So the idea here is that the product must be considered by the customer to be minimally desirable, useful, usable, and valuable. When we think about business viability, really the business must regard the product as minimally feasible, sustainable, scalable, and valuable. And again, I'm not going to, for time's sake, I'm not going to drain all of these or pontificate any more than that. But I really feel like if we can come at the MVP with this mindset and really lean into what we can bring to this concept of a minimum product that is truly viable or likely to be viable, I think that's where we'll gain a lot of ground with our peers on the engineering and business sides of things. And that is everything. I'm only 4 minutes over. So let's go.
That was awesome. Thank you. I did look it up. Last time you came and spoke with us was September 1st, 2020. So it's been
Oh my
almost 2
goodness.
years. Yeah. But this is fantastic.
It's been too long.
I did have a question. So I've tried this staggered approach before to sprinting, and it's always kind of a mixed bag. Like it's my preferred way of working on small teams, right? One designer, one front end developer, one or two back end developers. Like that cadence works perfectly because there's just the right amount of work. But what
Yes.
I found on larger teams is we get into this cycle of working 2 or 3 sprints ahead on design, and then we don't get that
Yes.
cross
Yes.
communication. So
Yeah.
what are your experiences of just like pulling back on the reins, or how do you kind of imagine handling that
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
situation?
I think it's so I I feel kind of bad that I didn't say this sooner, but a lot of the concepts that I shared today are very simple, and I think they're easy to grasp. But simple does not mean rarely means easy. And so you've done a really good job of outlining that, this, especially with human centered iteration, that idea is easy for folks to get on board with. But where we struggle is the discipline required to kind of keep more of an optimal workload and workflow going. I think it is very difficult to um, to try to find the right balance of, okay, in this design sprint, what is the work that we're going to be doing that is going to be most useful in the next engineering sprint. And there are times when a big, huge design problem will need a few sprints to complete so that it's ready for development. But by and large, you really need to, and this is this is another kind of unintended soapbox moment. One of the other misconceptions that I hear about Agile is like, oh yeah, we don't need project management. Um, that's true if you have a really, 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 really good Scrum Master who is a very, very, very good project manager. So that's my never to be humble opinion. But yeah, the people who are really skilled and adept at planning work um, are in heightened demand when you're trying to balance and coordinate and interweave multiple disciplines. Because really, what I've given is just kind of a quick and very simplified view of okay, you've got designers and you have engineers, but actually there's more to it than that. You have the business that's telling product owners to then tell designers to, and so as much as we want to avoid quote unquote waterfall, it's kind of happening all around, and it's those things that are fueling sprints, and the sprints are a way to organize work. So it's hard, it can be done, and it needs to be evaluated. I've seen most success when sprint retros actually happen and are super quality, and that's a great place to kind of reevaluate. Okay, did we do in this sprint from everybody involved? Did we do what we needed to do, and how should we adjust going forward? And then there's also backlog grooming. Design should have a voice there too. I've also seen a lot of success. Some teams feel like, oh, we don't have to track design tasks in our sprint tool. We don't have to create stories for the design tasks. I've seen more success with creating stories for design tasks than trying to manage them some other way. So those are some things that I've seen success with.
Thank you.
Who else? What else?
So do you have any other good models for when you're sort of developing the initial like workflow?
Oh, so a workflow in terms of how the design capability shows up, or a workflow for like that you're actually designing for a user?
Uh, just the design capability and that the workflow, the initial sort of setting things up.
Yeah, actually, yeah, I have. I mean, it's literally what I do for a living. So I'd be happy, like seriously, if you want to connect outside of this, I'd be happy to kind of walk you through some stuff and show you like some things that I've done for other clients, obviously scrubbed, and things that I've done for teams that I've built in the past.
Actually, I've got another question.
Sure. Yeah.
So under transformation,
Mhm.
and specifically underneath establishing, you sort of talked about documenting and tracking success. What
Mhm.
are some of the best ways you found to document and track success within UX UI in particular?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So one of the interesting things, one of the interesting challenges that any experience design capability has in an organization is kind of proving that it's doing what it says it will do. And
Mhm.
so the first thing that you want to document is what it is that you claim to do. So is it that you exist to, so and I'll just use some team mandates that I've had in the past. Is it that you exist to create the best possible experience for users and for customers and employees, period? Like, okay, great. How do we actually do that? Well, what's telling us where they have pain now? Okay, good. There are some measurements and some KPIs, some survey results, some web traffic. You document those. So you document the claim or the objective. You assess how it's going currently, and then through your design team's effort, you then remeasure and say, because of what we did, look at how the metrics moved on the this survey or this or this particular set of analytics that we're tracking. So that's a way to do it. So that's actual performance of the experience that you're designing. Another KPI is actual team performance. Does the team bring the skills to bear that they say that they have? Great. Our XD capability says that they can do research, strategy, and design. What does that mean? Let's document that in a skills framework, and then let's regularly assess that so that we know where all the different practitioners stand and can grow and stretch and augment as we need to. That's also a performance metric. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's very helpful.
And obviously you want to document the crap out of all of that stuff so that
Mhm.
you have something that you can point to and say, here's what we said we would do, here's what we did, here's the result.
Definitely.
So this question might be a little in the weeds, but I'm curious if you could speak a little bit to your process for doing secondary research. The way that I've seen it done in the past is kind of Wild West or just Google searches. So I'm just curious if
You're
you have
right.
a method to your madness or if it's
um
just whatever you can find.
so okay, so here's I'll start with this. Wild West secondary research is better than no secondary research. So, so I will always start there.
Fair.
No, what it so I'll also start with it depends. So much of the secondary research that I do starts with, okay, client, what information do you already have that answers this question? And usually that will inspire them to say, oh, well, we ran this survey. Great. A secondary research activity would be to grab the results and recommendations from that survey. Oh, we don't have results and recommendations. Awesome. This just turned into some primary research. So that's kind of how I like to start it. If the client that I'm working with is large enough and kind of a player, a significant player in whatever industry that they're in, there are other research houses like Forrester, Gartner that will actually have research done on those specific industries that will help inspire. Okay, what solutions do we think we want? So these other companies, according to these research houses, are facing, the industry in general is facing X, Y, and Z. And you do secondary research by consuming their studies, and then you take their conclusions and recommendations and synthesize them into a set of conclusions and recommendations for your client or or for your organization.
Cool, thank you.
But again, Wild West research.
Yeah.
If you're going to do nothing or Wild West research, do Wild West research.
So how did you get into starting your company? Like, were you previously working for someone? Like, what was your journey?
Yeah. So since 2008, I've been in design leadership roles,
Okay.
and I realized pretty quickly that I really like where I'm happiest is helping companies establish new capabilities or expand existing capabilities. I'm very attracted to problems where I have to solve new problems for whoever it is that I'm working for. And so back in, so I've always kind of had this dream in the back of my mind to kind of start a company that does that for other companies. And so I kind of intentionally steered my career toward leadership positions for companies that were building new things or trying to expand existing things. I've also learned that I'm not a maintenance man. I really, I'm not about just keeping the lights on for design capabilities. Uh, I like to work with people who want to grow, and or do something brand spanking new. And so I was like, well, I have a hypothesis that there is a need in the market for a company that does this, and so that's the hypothesis I've been testing for about 2.5 years.
Very cool.
Do you have any recommendations or approaches that you'd suggest in formulating a new research department? This is
It
probably a
depends.
whole other like hour
We
conversation,
should
but
seriously, Michelle, if you want to chat afterwards, I'd be really happy to.
yeah.
So the approach that I would take is trying to understand as much as I could. Okay, what's the current state of things? Who desires what in the organization, and how much do their desires matter? So so stuff like that, and that would inform any kind of process. But yeah, it would really be about understanding where the capability is currently, where's the pain, and what pain can we solve, and then that usually will give you traction to move from alleviating pain to making improvements.
Maybe I may take you up on scheduling some separate time.
I would love that.
Do you have any suggestions for people going into UX UI as a whole?
Oh wow. I Blanket, like without any other context. Anybody who I've talked to who is considering getting into this field, something that I try to be pretty honest about up front is getting a real answer to this question: do you have a natural empathy for the human condition? If the answer to that question is not a resounding yes, that to me is like probably the first and most foundational qualifier to be really good in this field. Um, so that's usually where I start. If you struggle, I have a love-hate relationship with our species. But my love is far stronger and more vibrant and more motivating than my hate. We are amazing and we are ridiculous. So
Accurate.
that's the first thing, and then beyond that, it's what kind of work really resonates with you, and that once you've crossed that initial kind of natural empathy hurdle, what really motivates and drives you helps me to understand where an individual might plug in. So if somebody really loves learning about why people do what they do and making recommendations based on that, you probably want to lean heavier into research. If you are someone who, ever since you were a little kid, you've been drawing, painting, anything creative, making music, whatever, you might be interested in like actually crafting the experience of the product or the service or the technology. So that's where you get into like prototyping and service design and graphic design and information architecture and interaction design. So that kind of stuff. There's also people who love all of it. I'm one of those folks, and I think this is a UX generalist alliance. I'm a generalist until I die. I once interviewed for a position, and they're like, "Well, we understand that you can do research, strategy, and design, but if you had to do one of them, if you only had to do one of them, what would it be?" I'm like, "I would find a job, or I could do all of them."
Yes.
Thank you and good day, sir.
Right. Because if you need someone who only does one, then you don't need me, you know. But if I haven't had a ton of experience with all those things, then yeah, grab onto something, because some experience is better than none. But I had reached a point in my career where I had demonstrated like strong capability and all those things, and so I'm like, I'm not going to give one of these up. What are you kidding?
That's awesome.
What else? ¿Qué más?
As a fellow newbie UX designer, I'm curious how important do you think like having a really diverse portfolio is, or is it more important to be focusing in on like one really good thing that you want to showcase? I guess the portfolio thing has been kind of stumping me.
Yeah. So my first, like if we were sitting down for coffee and you had asked that question, I would say, well, it depends on what you want to be when you grow up, and I know it's hard. It's even hard for me. I'm nearly 50, and I still am struggling to figure out what I want to do next. But as long as you have a goal in mind, then your decisions today should drive toward achieving that goal. So if you want to specialize in research, you need to intentionally steer your career toward as many research opportunities as you can possibly get. If you want to be more of a generalist, same thing. You need to steer your career toward getting as broad of an exposure. Now, let's say the only job you can get is an entry-level interaction designer. Awesome. You go be the best entry-level interaction designer possible and take every single opportunity to expand your skill sets into research and strategy, and or visual design or conceptual design or anything like that. Because I've never met an organization, actually that's not true. Most organizations, when they see that level of drive and ambition of you expanding and magnifying beyond what you were hired to do, that's when you'll get more opportunities. Now, I have been in two organizations that discouraged people from kind of stepping out of line, and that to me is a huge red flag. So take what you can for as long as you can from those kinds of organizations, and look for something else.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Also, this has been a great presentation. I'm having a hard time coming up with questions because I'm just soaking it all in.
No worries. No worries. And I'm only in the Gainesville area. I don't know where everybody is, but I'm only in the Gainesville area until December. Then I'm moving to Oregon. So if you wanna meet up, or if you want to chat in person, we have until December. But I'm always open to meet virtually. Like I said, it's what I do for a living. My company works with organizations, works with teams, works with individual designers, services for all those folks.
So I will take this opportunity to throw out a heads up to everybody, particularly those in the Gainesville area. We are hoping to do some mixer type events in the coming months. COVID, of course, is on the upswing again, so it might be a little bit longer, but we'll definitely be keeping an eye on that and planning some events, hopefully before you leave.
Be fun.
in December. There is also Start GNV is a local tech nonprofit group. They plan lots of events as well. And on June 17th, 352 is actually hosting Start GNV at Tioga's event for, they have a movie night on the grass. So if you guys want to come out and watch Soul and grab some cupcakes from the Start GNV table, I'd encourage you guys to come out, say hi to each other, and hopefully we can see you guys then.
That sounds like fun.
I hope so. Unfortunately, I won't be there, so you will not see this lovely face. But
We will
Maybe
think of
next
you
time.
in spirit.
thank you. Have a cupcake for me, please.
Yes.
Just don't drop it on the ground in a salute to me, because that'd be weird.
Thank you again, Matt. I totally agree with Brittany. This was an incredible conversation. I've been like furiously taking notes.
Yay! Yay.
So yes. So you're a really great presenter and we really appreciate having you.
Well,
Agreed.
this has been fun. Anytime.
Well, and we are global, so you're always welcome to go back in another 2 years. So
Hey, right on. Or maybe sooner if you'd like. I feel kind of
that'd be
bad.
lovely. That would be lovely.
Yeah. Do it. This was so great.
Right.
All right. Without
As-
further ado.
Sorry, one last reminder, don't forget to join that Slack group if you haven't already. I have hooked up an RSS feed to the Knowledge Center channel. So that will be dropping articles in, I think every day from Nielsen Norman Group. I'm working on some other RSS feeds. So you guys are welcome to message me, at Michelle, if you find any RSS feeds that you think would be cool to have kind of feeding that channel. But if you find articles as well, please go ahead and drop them in. And I encourage you guys to just discuss them there in that channel. If you find something interesting, you want to talk about it, go ahead and just post in there, and hopefully we can start some dialogue around some of this stuff.
Totally. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you everyone for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks
Thank
all.
Very good.
Bye, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.